Hello everyone, I'm Samuel Ryman and this is Samuel's Racing Show, MotoGP is Awesome, 2020 edition. Now let me explain the title of this video. MotoGP is awesome, every single year. This just happens to be the 2020 edition and I couldn't call it a season preview because the first round already happened. But even though, yes, I could have called it a preview 1 week ago, I wanted to see the first round just to make sure it was still awesome, and yes, it is. Okay, so this video is more directed towards people who may not have watched MotoGP in the past. Hopefully, some people watching this video have, but if you haven't, I'm going to try and convert you. And in order to understand the current situation of MotoGP, you've got to go back about 5 years, I would say. At least that's around the time I really started to getting into it again. I've always followed it, but the last 5 years I've been following it more so. About 5 years ago, we were in a situation where there were two dominant teams and one semi-dominant team. They were Repsol Honda and Movistar Yamaha were the two dominant teams, and Ducati were also able to get the occasional win or two. The riders, not drivers, the riders on the Hondas at the time were Marc Marquez and Dani Pedrosa, and the riders on the Yamaha were Valentino Rossi and Jorge Lorenzo. Now, if you've heard anything about MotoGP at all over the last 5 years, you're probably familiar with at least the names Valentino Rossi and Marc Marquez. Valentino Rossi is a living legend of a sport. He has been successful since the early 2000s. He's starting to come in the tail end of his career, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. And then also there's Marc Marquez, who's been the Lewis Hamilton equivalent of MotoGP over the last 7 or so years, you could say. Dani Pedrosa was on the Honda as well. Jorge Lorenzo was on the Yamaha. Pedrosa was alright. He would win occasionally. And then Jorge Lorenzo was also able to get a title in a bit of a controversial season there, with Rossi and Marquez also involved in that title fight. So, Lorenzo has since retired. He retired at the end of the 2019 season, and Pedrosa has retired as well. And as I mentioned, the Ducatis were up there as well. And all what me explaining this is building towards is the fact that the scene of MotoGP has changed a lot very recently. And that's good because until very recently, well, not even until very recently, now, Marc Marquez has been dominating. And now the scene has changed, and I think we're getting set to see a bit of a shake-up and a bit of an interesting 2020 season. Because now you've got Repsol Honda, Marc Marquez, and Alex Marquez related. And Alex Marquez isn't quite there yet, it would seem, at the talent that Marc Marquez is. And Marc Marquez just had a big crash in the season opener at Jerez. And that is probably going to put him out for a couple of rounds. Doesn't necessarily mean he won't win the championship. In MotoGP, in order to be considered badly injured, I was going to say you have to not even be able to walk, but no, that's not true. People who can't walk sometimes still compete in MotoGP or any kind of motorcycle racing, really. These guys are crazy. So already, you got a bit of an interesting championship scenario, not necessarily in a good way, in that Marc Marquez, one of the fastest drivers, probably one of the favourites for the title, is injured and probably going to miss a race or two. Then you go over to Movistar Yamaha. Their two riders right now are still Valentino Rossi and Maverick Vinales. Now, I'm going to get up on my soapbox right now and say Rossi is finally too old. He is at the tail end of his career and he's not going to win a race. Here's the problem. Every time I've said that for the past 5 years, he's gone on to win races and contend for the championship. Or at least most of those years he has. And so now I've said it again. And he's going to win races and contend for the championship again. Which is going to be fun to see because, you don't want to see Rossi go. But more realistically, though, let's be realistic. That's more likely what Vinales, his teammate, is going to be able to do. He's a young guy. He's came in. He's going to do well. So now you have six motorcycle manufacturers in MotoGP. You got Yamaha and Honda, already mentioned they're two big factory teams there. But you also have Ducati, Suzuki, Aprilia, and KTM. All of which are at different levels of success. The nice thing about it is MotoGP is still at a level where you don't always have to have the best bike to win. It's a rider that makes a difference, especially when it rains in MotoGP races, which it does quite often. I don't know why, but it also makes me wonder if Darrell Waltrip's, what was that? You guys all know what I'm talking about. Where they're all going around the track. Vortex Theory. Darrell Waltrip in NASCAR, he has this famous Vortex Theory, saying if you have cars on the racetrack, it creates a column of dust or whatever, pollution that tells the rain to go away. It sounds absolutely stupid, except for the fact that it seems to work in Formula 1, because every time in Formula 1 there's rain clouds above the track. Oh no, but it's not raining on the racetrack and we get dry races and it's frustrating. If you watched the Hungarian Grand Prix last weekend, you know what I'm talking about. But MotoGP, the motorcycles don't produce as much pollution, so it doesn't seem to happen that often, and we seem to get more wet races, and that creates drama, and that creates unexpected victories, and that happens quite a few times a season in MotoGP. So already, even though you have these other manufacturers, other teams that might not be as strong as performing bike as the top Hondas and the top Yamahas, they can still sneak out a win every now and then. Alright. But all that being said, we haven't even mentioned the guy who won the season opener last weekend at Jerez, and that is Fabio Quartararo. Did I butcher his name? Probably. But he rides a Yamaha, not one of the factory Yamahas, but a very fast Yamaha as it is. It has the same sponsorship as the Mercedes Formula 1 car. So that tells you all you need to know there. They seem to have the money behind it and the performance behind it too. And Fabio Quartararo was someone who was really able to give Marc Marquez a run for his money last season. 2 or 3 seasons ago, Andrea Dovizioso on the Ducati was also able to give Marquez a run for his money. As I mentioned, Rossi can occasionally do it. Vinales can do it. Alex Marquez is on one of the fastest bikes on the grid. Who knows if he can do it? We really have, I think, an interesting championship situation heating up for the 2020 MotoGP season. And you know what? I am going to say that even assuming that Marc Marquez is okay and back in a couple of rounds, because he was having a difficult time at Jerez. Now, let me explain. Over the past few years, you might have seen clips of Marc Marquez on YouTube or on Twitter or whatever, crashing. And when I say crashing, he crashes, but he doesn't crash. In other words, he falls off a bike, the bike is on the ground, sparks are coming out, he's on his knee, it's going towards the gravel trap, the commentators are screaming, the crowd is screaming, Marquez is out of a race. Oh wait, no he's not, he saved it. If you don't believe me, go and watch some of them. And he kind of did that at the season opener while he was leading the race. You know, you're thinking, oh, Marc Marquez is... was he leading the race or was he second? I can't remember. He was up front anyway. He drops back to 10th or so, races his way back up, probably going to finish the race in second behind Quartararo, who got his first win. Well done to him. And then Marquez has a hard crash. But Quartararo and a couple other riders up there, I think, are at the point where they're gaining enough experience now where they can give Marquez a run for his money. And Marquez's risk is part of his riding style. I don't think this is a crash that has broke Marc Marquez. I think he's going to come back and keep racing as hard as he has in the past, and that means he's going to crash again. And, you know, when you have that bit of Ricky Bobby Talladega Nights mentality of, you know, win the race or come home with handlebars in this instance, you know, at the level of MotoGP, that's going to lead to the odd injury or two. And eventually, Marc Marquez will start getting old. And I completely forgot to do research before this video and judge how old Marc Marquez is. But he's definitely nowhere near the tail end of his career yet. He's still got 1 or 2 championships left in him if he can keep himself in one piece. So, other than the fact that who knows who can win the title and who knows who can win the next race, you know, the unpredictability, other than that fact of MotoGP, why should you watch it? Well, if you're in the United States, one great reason you should watch it this year is it's back on the channel that everybody gets, if you're in cable, NBC Sports. It's on the NBC family of networks. I don't think it's live all the time, but it's been on BN Sports for the past few seasons. Not everyone, myself, had BN Sports, and so it was kind of hard to keep up with MotoGP. MotoGP, like Formula 1, does have a video pass, so if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, there is that you can find on their website, or anywhere. They like to promote the hell out of it. So you know, you can watch it. You can watch it. The racing is great, so you should watch it. And at the very end of the day, okay, let's go back to that point of a racing is great. Oh boy, how do we explain this? If you're a Formula 1 fan, or a NASCAR fan, or any kind of racing fan, normally you'll notice the lower divisions are, you know, feature more exciting racing. The cars or bikes are all a bit more similar to each other. And so there's tighter pack racing, and it's really just a matter of who's having a good day, who has track position. They're the guys who end up winning the races. MotoGP has 2 support divisions. It has Moto2 and Moto3. Moto3 ends up being draft battles normally, with 10 riders fighting for the win on the final lap. Moto2, you get it broken up a little bit more. And MotoGP, you would think, you know, using the NASCAR Cup Series or Formula 1 Series philosophy, you'd say, okay, well, yeah, there's still some good racing in the middle of a field, but 1 or 2 guys are dominating it up front. Not normally. Normally, that kind of racing that you see in midfield in any other kind of series in the world is still the kind of racing you see up front. Sure, the top 3 or 4 riders will normally break away from the riders in 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th or whatever by a few seconds. But because of the way the slipstream will work, and because how much rider talent makes a difference in MotoGP rather than the bike, you end up getting these battles out there on circuit between different manufacturers, and you get these different groups of these battles going on. So you'll have a 4-way fight for first going on. At the same time, you'll have a 4-way fight for 5th going on, and a 4-way fight for 9th. And they'll just switch positions all race round, all race long. The race is only 45 minutes long, which is a perfect length. You know, any bit shorter, and it's kind of a sprint race mentality, and you kind of lose the mystique that you have from an endurance race. But any longer, and you would have to fall into the realm of pit stops, or the race being too long. MotoGP don't worry about pit stops, unless it rains. And then they get off their dry bikes and get onto their bikes with wet weather tyres, and that's fun to watch on its own. How some riders have got that down to a fine art. They just hop off one bike onto the other bike without ever touching the ground. But what that creates also is some interesting strategy at the start of a race. Some riders will start on soft tyres, some riders will start on hard tyres, or a soft front tyre or soft rear tyre. And you'll see, you know, comers and goers during the long run of a MotoGP race. So the strategy racing is great. The pack racing is great. The fact that you never know who's going to win is great. The fact that you don't know who's going to win the championship is great. The fact that it's on a TV channel that a lot of people in the United States get is great. I remember at Fox Sports, right before MotoGP departed Fox Sports, we had that controversial season finale at Phillip Island where I think Jorge Lorenzo won the championship over Valentino Rossi because Marquez wouldn't pass him, and a lot of people believe that Marquez was refusing to pass Lorenzo because Marquez and Rossi had some controversy early in the season. They've been involved in a couple of collisions. That race was controversial. It was it ended up being the last race to date of MotoGP on Fox Sports in the US, and it got a bunch of ratings. Now, of course, we haven't had those ratings over the past few years because it's been on BN Network, which not a whole lot of people got. It's back to NBC. Hopefully NBC can get the ball rolling again and start to make MotoGP big in the United States again. Don't think there are any great riders of American descent in MotoGP right now, which would be good to get out there on the grid again, because that does seem to make a difference over here. Obviously, the late Nicky Hayden being a good example of that. But there's a lot of reasons why, as the title says above, MotoGP is awesome. 2020 edition. And the way 2020 is going, it's nice to know that something out there is still always going to be awesome, no matter what year it is.